Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey. We'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Kuf Dun Beis Amid Beis. We are holding in the midst of Siman Tov Kuf Chav Zayin, learning the halachas of Erev tavshilin. Mirz Hashem, today we will complete Siman Tov Kuf Chav Zayin. We will learn Siman Tov Kuf Chav Ches, and I hope that we will also begin Siman Tov Kuf Chav Tes, which is actually the final Siman in Chelik Hey. So we're really coming to the end of Chelik Hey. So let's turn now to Kuf Dun Beis Amid Aleph. We left off last night near the end of Sif Chav Beis. So we're 2 lines off the bottom in the Mechaber, right by the Ois Katan Oif Ayin Hey for the Mishnah Berurah. So in Sif Chav Beis, the Mechaber had said, if somebody forgets to make an Erev tavshilin before Yom Tov, and if we're dealing with the Shnei Yom Tovim Shel Golius, so Yom Tov was Thursday and Friday, this fellow forgot to make an Erev tavshilin on Wednesday, Erev Yom Tov, and he remembered on Thursday. So the Mechaber said that in that case we could make an Erev tavshilin al Tanai. What's the Tanai? On Thursday, on Yom Tov Rishon, the person could take a tavshil, and he should say, if today, Thursday, is Kodesh, then tomorrow, Friday, is really Chayil, because you only have 2 days Yom Tov, because it's fake the Yomi. So that tomorrow, Erev Shabbos, is really Chayil, and I don't need an Erev tavshilin at all. If, on the other hand, today is Chayil, Thursday is Chayil, and Friday is really the real day of Yom Tov, okay, so then I need an Erev tavshilin to allow me to cook and bake on Friday, which is Yom Tov, for the purposes of Shabbos. But today, Thursday, Yom Tov Rishon, is really Chayil, it's really Erev Yom Tov, so then I can make an Erev tavshilin today. So you make the Erev tavshilin al tonight. Now over here today, 2 lines off the bottom near the end of the line, the Mechaber says, V'yesh Omrim, however, there is another opinion over here. This is the Torah, brings this down in the name of Rabbeinu Ephraim. V'yesh Omrim, there are those that say, the Iles le midi de bashel me'esmoil, if he doesn't have anything that he cooked from Erev Yom Tov. So again, let's remember, this is happening, Shnei Yom Tovim Shel Golius. Yom Tov was Thursday and Friday. He remembered on Thursday that he neglected to make an Erev tavshilin, and now we're suggesting that he should make an Erev tavshilin al Tanai on Thursday. Says the Mechaber, according to this Yesh Omrim, it only works if he has something extant that he cooked on Wednesday, on Erev Yom Tov. He didn't cook it for an Erev tavshilin, but let's say he did cooking on Erev Yom Tov for Yom Tov. So he has food that he cooked. He has roast chicken that he cooked on Wednesday on Erev Yom Tov. He didn't cook it for the Erev tavshilin, but he has roast chicken. So then on Thursday, he could be saimach on those foods that he cooked on Wednesday. He could make the Erev tavshilin al Tanai and link it to that food that he prepared on Wednesday. Remember, the mechanics of Erev tavshilin are, I'm saying that I began my Shabbos preparations before Yom Tov, and I'm only completing them on Yom Tov. So even the Erev tavshilin al Tanai, according to the Rabbeinu Ephraim, it only works if you could hinge it upon a cooked dish that you made before Yom Tov. If he doesn't have anything that he cooked on Erev Yom Tov, Loi Mahani Tanai, the Tanai is not effective. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Ayin Hey, 2 lines off the bottom. V'yesh Omrim de Ilesle, says the Chavetz Chaim, v'naktinan kisvara harishona. However, we follow halacha l'maisa, the first opinion of the Mechaber, who says that in such a case we can make the Erev al Tanai when we have 2 days Yom Tovim Shel Golius. Okay, now we go to the bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch, Sif Chav Gimel. Im avar b'mezid. If somebody transgressed this halacha b'mezid, he knows that he's not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos without an Erev tavshilin. He doesn't have an Erev tavshilin. Oi, says the Rama, oi b'shoigeg. Or if this happened b'shoigeg, he neglected to make an Erev tavshilin. He forgot totally about the Erev tavshilin, and now he's cooking on Yom Tov for the purposes of Shabbos. So whether he did it b'mezid or he did it b'shoigeg, ubishel kama kederois shaloi l'tzarech Yom Tov. The bottom line is he cooked many different pots of food, and he didn't do it l'tzarech Yom Tov at all. He put up a chicken soup, he put up a chalent, he did it totally l'tzarech Shabbos. It's not l'tzarech Yom Tov at all, and he doesn't have an Erev tavshilin. Says the Mechaber, muter la'achlan, it is permissible for him to eat them b'Shabbos oy b'chol. So this could be a situation where Yom Tov was Thursday and Friday. He didn't have an erev tavshilin. So either Nebach on Friday, b'mezid, knowing that he doesn't have an erev tavshilin, he cooked for Shabbos. Or b'shaygig, he completely forgot about the whole issue and he cooked for Shabbos. Or it could be Yom Tov was Monday and Tuesday and he cooked for Wednesday. He cooked for the chayil. He cooked for the weekday, not for Shabbos at all. Either way, the Mechaber says mutter la'achlan, the food is permissible. We don't penalize him by asering the food. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah back on Kuf Nun Beis Amud Aleph, bottom line. Mishnah Berurah is cut Ayin Vav. Very interesting. The Mechaber said im avar b'mezid. So the Mechaber addressed a situation where a fellow did this intentionally. He knew that he's not allowed to cook now on Yom Tov for the weekday or for Shabbos without an erev tavshilin, and he transgressed the Isser. He cooked anyway. The Ramah put in the parentheses oy b'shoygeg, or if he did it b'shoygeg. The Chavetz Chaim is puzzled. What exactly is the bigger chiddush of shoygeg than mezid? If the Mechaber told me that you don't penalize him if he did it b'mezid, I would think it's a kavachomer that you don't penalize him if he only did it b'shoygeg. So the Chavetz Chaim explains oy b'shoygeg. Ashmi'inon, the Ramah is teaching me a chiddush here. Deloy tema, we do not say daf gemezid. Maybe it's only b'mezid that we don't penalize him. Why? Nobody is going to learn from this fellow to go ahead and cook for the weekday or for Shabbos without an erev tavshilin. Everybody knows that this individual did something which is blatantly usser. Everybody realizes he's a Rasha who's transgressing an Isser, and he's doing it b'mezid. So nobody's going to learn from what he's doing, and maybe that's why we don't penalize him. Aval b'shoygeg, but if we're dealing with somebody who did it b'shoygeg, we're dealing with somebody who simply just forgot, im natiroi, if we're matir him to do it, yavayu acherim lahakel ulaha'arim. If somebody sees that somebody cooked without an erev tavshilin, he's not a Rasha, it's just something that happened by accident. And we see that the food is mutter, so then somebody might say, oh, Vais Techais, this is not such a terrible thing. You could cook without an erev tavshilin and the food is mutter anyway. In that case, we're afraid that some other people may come to learn from this and they may come to do it as well. Okay, now we go to Sif Chav Daled, top line, Kuf Nun Beis Amud Beis. Let's say somebody made a harama. Somebody goes on Yom Tov and he puts up a chicken soup and a vegetable soup. And he claims that it's l'tzarech hayom. I'm doing it for Yom Tov. And then he takes the vegetable soup and he puts it in the refrigerator to use tomorrow during the week. Asur la'achla. In that case, we do penalize him. He did a harama to prepare food for the weekday or for Shabbos on Yom Tov without an erev tavshilin. It's a very clear harama what he did. Asur la'achla. You are not allowed to eat it. Now, the difference between this case and the previous case is that in the previous case, the fellow who did this, if he did it b'mezid, he didn't do a harama. He didn't claim that it was for Yom Tov purposes. He blatantly went ahead and was over an Isser. In this case, the guy says, no, I'm pure and white and innocent as the driven snow. I'm using harama. No, I'm cooking for Yom Tov. I'm cooking for Yom Tov. And it's not really for Yom Tov. It's just a harama. It's just trickery. In that case, we do penalize him. Asur la'achla, the Mechaber says, you are not allowed to eat that food. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut Ayin Zayin. Im he'erim l'tzarech hayom. Ritzayna loymar. What the Mechaber wants to say over here is, shebe'emes ein tzarech elo l'kedera achas. Be'emes, in truth, this person only needs one pot for his Yom Tov meal. Umevashel shniya b'derech ha'arama. He put up a second pot of food, b'derech ha'arama, using trickery. She'omer, he goes ahead and he says, yeah, I'm doing it l'tzarech hayom. Shemi yizdamnu la'archim. I'm afraid guests might show up. Aisha bisher l'tzarech hayom, or maybe he already cooked for his Yom Tov Suda. The chazar ubisher l'tzarech hayom, and now he goes up and he puts another soup up, l'tzarech hayom. Va'amar shiktera rishayna yishar lamachar. He says, look, I put up a soup this morning. That was for the Yom Tov Suda. Now I come home. Yeah, I'm putting up another soup. This soup that I'm putting up now is l'tzarech hayom. The soup that I put up this morning, I'll put that one away for the week. Aval kishemevashel b'derech harama sheyocha b'nashniya kizayis. But another type of a harama, if it's a harama that what he does is he puts up a second pot and he says, I'm going to eat it today. I'm making another soup and I'm going to eat from it. I'm going to partake from it by the Yom Tov Suda, and he actually does. Mavur le'el b'sif chaf aleph, we said earlier, yesterday in Sif chaf aleph, that's mutter. Right? In Sif chaf aleph. Yeah, if you don't have an erev tavshilin, so you could put up another pot and you could eat from it as long as you eat from it on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. Okay. And now what he's doing is he's putting away one pot of food for the week. The Baharama, in this case, where the person is using a harama, he's trying to be a wise guy. Now we're afraid that other people are going to learn from what he's doing, and they're going to do it as well. We're also concerned that he himself will do this on another Yom Tov without an erev tavshilin. But like I said, the previous sif was dealing with somebody who's being over b'mezid. Over there, we're not afraid people are going to learn from him. Ayin tes, also la'achla. In this case, the food is not permissible. You're not allowed to eat it. Hainu lo'yvel of nevesai, the kansur rabbanon. The Chazal penalized this individual, so he's not allowed to eat this food, nor are any other members of his household allowed to eat it. Avala acherim, but as far as other people, mutter l'maitzah Yom Tov miyad. The food is mutter to them immediately on Motzei Yom Tov. Kasav the Chemin Moshe writes, that for this person who made this prohibited harama, it's also only aser until Motzei Shabbos, but Motzei Shabbos he would be allowed to eat this food. Okay, now we go to Siman Tov Kuf Chav Ches. Dinei eruvei chatzeiros b'Yom Tov. The halacha of eruvei chatzeiros on Yom Tov u'bay beis seifim, and here we have two seifim. So let's just remind ourselves the halacha of eruvei chatzeiros. When you have a chatzer is a courtyard that has many houses opening onto it. Back in those heady days when we were learning the halachas of eruvei chatzeiros, my classic example of the eruvei chatzeiros was always the bungalow colony. The bungalow colony, you have one chatzer, and the whole bungalow colony is surrounded by a fence. But then you have individual bungalows, and let's make it simple. We're dealing with a bungalow colony where the individual people each own their own bungalow. It's not a colony where we're renting out the bungalows. That just makes it more complicated. So the bungalows are owned by individual people, but all of the bungalows open onto a common chatzar. And the whole thing is surrounded by a perimeter fence. So really, midaraisa, the chatzar is a rishos hayachid. The bungalows are all, each one, a rishos hayachid. So really, to transport something from a bungalow to the chatzar, or from the chatzar to the bungalow, should be 100% mutter. You're going from one rishos hayachid to another rishos hayachid. What's the problem? The Chazal were misakin that you're not allowed to transfer from the chatzar to the bungalow, from the bungalow to the chatzar, or from one bungalow to another bungalow without joining everybody in an eruvei chatzeiros. Why? Because the Chazal looked at it and they said, look what's happening over here. You're transferring something from a bungalow, which is a rishos hayachid that is individual. It's owned by one individual party. And you're transferring something from that bungalow to a common chatzar that serves all of the bungalows. That looks and smells almost like you're transferring from a rishos hayachid to a rishos harabim. And if we allow people to do that, they might come to transgress the real Isser Daraisa of transferring from a bona fide rishos hayachid to a bona fide rishos harabim. So they said that this is aser unless you employ an eruvei chatzeiros. Now we want to know, how about the halacha of eruvei chatzeiros on Yom Tov? Do you need an eruvei chatzeiros on Yom Tov? Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph. Yom Tov ain't tzarich eruvei chatzeiros v'shetufei mevuos. On Yom Tov, there is no requirement for an eruvei chatzeiros, and there's no requirement for a shetufei mevuos. Shetufei mevuos is where you have a lot of chatzerim that all open up onto one common mavui. So then we have to join all the chatzerim together so that you should be allowed to transfer from the chatzeiros to the mavui and vice versa. So the Mechaber says that on Yom Tov, There is no din of eruvei chatzeiros. There is no din of shetufei mavuos. Aval eruvei techumin tzarich. But there is an isser of tchum on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to go outside of the tchum on Yom Tov the same way you're not allowed to go outside of the tchum on Shabbos. And therefore, the concept of eruvei techumin, where you go ahead and you go out of the city limits to the limit of your tchum. You don't have to go all the way to the limit. You could go halfway out of your tchum, let's say, and you set up an eruv over there so that you're kind of shvisa over there. We now look at it as if you live over there. So now you extended your tchum. Eruvei techumin tzarich. There is a concept of eruvei techumin on Yom Tov. The chol hilchas techumin tisparu behilchas eruvei techumin, and all of the halachas of eruvei techumin, we're not going to repeat them over here in hilchas Yom Tov. They were already covered in the halachas of eruvei techumin. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Aleph, Yom Tov ain't tzarich of eruvei chatzeiros. We don't need to make an eruvei chatzeiros for Yom Tov. Says the Chaim. Why? Very simple. The chol elu niskan mishum geder hoitzah. Why do we have an eruvei chatzeiros on Shabbos? We have an eruvei chatzeiros because we're, like I explained, we're afraid that if we allow you to transfer from the bungalow to the chatzar, from the chatzar to the bungalow, you're going to come to do hoitzah mamish. You're going to come to transfer from a real Rishas HaRabim to Rishas HaYachid or vice versa. But that's only negay on Shabbos. Ubi Yom Tov kaimelon, on Yom Tov we hold the mitoch shehutra hoitzah l'tzarich, eichel nefesh, since the malacha of hoitzah is mutter on Yom Tov l'tzarich eichel nefesh, if you're doing it for food preparation, hutra nami shaloi l'tzarich. It's also mutter shaloi l'tzarich eichel nefesh. So hoitzah is mutter on Yom Tov. So if hoitzah is mutter on Yom Tov, why do we need the whole concept of eruvei chatzeiros? There's no isser of hoitzah. Like we learned earlier in Tavkuf Yud Ches. That's the first thing the Chavetz Chaim says, and that's how the Chavetz Chaim explains the flat-out statement of the Mechaber that there is no need for eruvei chatzeiros or shetufei mavuos on Yom Tov. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, umashma mistimas l'shoinoi, from the blanket statement that the Mechaber makes, it's implied the lo tiknu klal eruvei chatzeiros l'Yom Tov, that there is absolutely no need for an eruvei chatzeiros on Yom Tov at all. V'chein sasam la'el b'siman tough tes zayin sifhei. And indeed, the Mechaber said that earlier in Siman tough tes zayin sifhei. V'chein, however, medivrei Ramah la'el b'siman tough kuf yud ches sif aleph b'haga, from what the Ramah said earlier in tough kuf yud ches sif aleph. Tov Kuf Yud Ches Sif Aleph is on page Kuf Mem Amid Beis, and over there, the Mechaber is talking about hoitzah, and that's where the Mechaber teaches us that the halacha that by hoitzah we say mitoy shehutra hoitzah l'tzarich achila hutra shaloi l'tzarich. That's where the Mechaber says that halacha. But the Ramah says over there in Tavkuf Yud Ches, that only applies to things that have some level of tzarich Yom Tov. Haga hatzrichim like tzas, when we say you're allowed to do hoitzah on Yom Tov because of the svara of hoyel, that's only if you're being moitzi things that have some level, they at least have a tzas tzarich of eichel nefesh, of Yom Tov. Or you're afraid they're going to get stolen if you leave them there. But stam things, even the Mechaber said, just to do hoitzah on a stone, you want to carry a stone on Yom Tov, that you're not allowed to do if it has no tzarich at all. And then later in the Sif, the Ramah says, V'im hiniach eruv, if you make an eruvei chatzeiros on Yom Tov, mutter l'taltel u'lahaitzi kol sheyesh le'teres kri, af al pi she'ein tzarich hayom klal. The Ramah says clearly in Tavkuf Yud Ches that on Yom Tov, if you made an eruvei chatzeiros, then you could transfer kalim between the house and the chatzar, between the chatzar and the house. It's very clear from the Ramah that you need an eruvei chatzeiros. So that's why the Chavetz Chaim says over here, Umashma mistimas l'shainai delay tikdu klal eruvei chatzeiros l'Yom Tov v'chein sasam le'el b'siman tav tezayin sifhei. From the blanket statement of the Mechaber, it's clear that the Mechaber holds that there's no need for an eruvei chatzeiros on Yom Tov at all. But from the words of the Ramah that I just read to you in Siman Tov Kuf Yud Ches, Muchach Disfir Lei, it's clear that the Ramah holds the Devarim she'ein behem tzarich klal, also lahaitzi bebayis lechatzer b'lo eruvei chatzeiros. You're not allowed to transfer things that have no tzarich of Yom Tov at all from a house to a chatzer or from a chatzer to a house unless you have an eruvei chatzeiros. He says, "V'miniach erev, if you made an eruvei chatzeiros, mutter l'taltel l'haitzi kol sheyesh lo teras kli, then you're allowed to be moitzi anything that you could consider a keli, af al pi she'ein tzarech hayom klal, even though there's absolutely no need for it for Yom Tov. But if you didn't make an erev, then you can't be moitzi something that has no Yom Tov purpose. Not only you can't be mitzi it from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim, you can't be mitzi it from the house to the Chatzar or from the Chatzar to the house. If it has no Yom Tov use. If it has a Yom Tov use, you can. But if it has no Yom Tov use, you can't do that Hoitzah D'Rabbanan without an eruvei chatzeiros. So says the Ramah in Tov Kuf Yud Ches. V'alkein, and therefore, Kasra Achrayim, the Achrayim write, that to be concerned for this sheet of the Ramah, the Achrayim say, the Keshema Arev eruvei chatzeiros be'erev Pesach, that when you set up the eruvei chatzeiros for the whole year on erev Pesach, if you remember when we learned the eruvei chatzeiros, we said that that's the minig. They make it eruvei chatzeiros for the whole year on erev Pesach. Bishvil Shabbosos Hashana, for all of the Shabbosos of the year. Yichlal Gam Yom Tov. You should also make the eruvei chatzeiros for Yom Tov to cover this shita of the Ramah. So that you could even be mitzi from the house to the chazer or from the chazer to the house, things that have no tzarech of Yom Tov at all. V'yomer, and you should say in the nusach of the eruvei chatzeiros that you're making the erev l'chol Shabbosos v'yamim tovim shel shana zu. U'misha meniach b'chol erev Shabbos, somebody who makes an eruvei chatzeiros every erev Shabbos, he doesn't make one for the whole year. V'ikla Yom Tov samach loi, and there's a Yom Tov that comes out near a Shabbos. Yoma l'Shabbos zev Yom Tov haba aleinu l'tova. He should say, I'm making an eruvei chatzeiros now for Shabbos and for the coming Yom Tov. Okay, now we go to Siv Beis. Yom Tov shechal li yois be'erev Shabbos. Let's say Yom Tov falls out on Friday, on erev Shabbos. Ein ma'arvin lo eruvei chatzeiros v'lo eruvei techumin. Yom Tov fell out on Friday, and you remember on Friday on erev Shabbos that you needed a eruvei chatzeiros, and you wanted to make it a eruvei techumin so that you should be able to go mimavakachayil, somebody who's in the hospital and is added a tchum. But now it's Yom Tov. Are you allowed to make it a eruvei chatzeiros or an eruvei techumin on Yom Tov? Says the Mechaber, no, you're not allowed to make one. Afilu iminiach erev tavshilin, and the Ramah says that this is true even if you made an erev tavshilin. So you might think, I made an erev tavshilin, and an erev tavshilin allows me to do malacha on Yom Tov for Shabbos preparations, so maybe it allows me to make it a eruvei chatzeiros or an eruvei techumin on Yom Tov for Shabbos. On that, the Ramah tells you no, you're not allowed to do this. Afilu iminiach erev tavshilin. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. What's the problem over here? It says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and bays, ein ma'arvin, you're not allowed to make an eruvei chatzeiros or an eruvei techumin on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Says the Chavetz Chaim, the mechzei kemesakin l'tzarech machar, because it looks like you're doing preparation on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Indeed, you are. I'm not sure why he says mechzei, maybe because it's not so much of a tikkun, but the mechzei kemesakin l'tzarech machar. V'meniach eruvei chatzeiros me erev Yom Tov l'shem Yom Tov v'adayna erev kayim. Let's say you made it eruvei chatzeiros on erev Yom Tov, and you did it for Yom Tov. You were worrying about the Ramah, and you made it eruvei chatzeiros for Yom Tov, not like the Mechaber. But you didn't make that erev to cover Shabbos also. You only did it for Yom Tov. But v'adayin ha'erev kayim, but the food of the erev is still extant. Soymech alav gam l'Shabbos, you could rely on that eruvei chatzeiros for Shabbos purposes too. Eis Katan Gimel, afilu erev tavshilin. The Ramah said that this halacha is true even if you made an erev tavshilin. The erev tavshilin does not allow you to set up an eruvei chatzeiros or an eruvei techumin on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Explains the Chavetz the eruvei tavshilin ain't matter elo l'sakin tzarchei suda l'tzarch machar. What does an erev tavshilin do? An erev tavshilin allows you to go ahead and do malacha. It allows you to do bishul and afiyah on Yom Tov for Shabbos purposes. That's what an erev tavshilin allows you to do. And remember, we said the mechanics of that are that really the cooking and the baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos is not an issa daraisa. It's only an issa derabanan. According to Reb Chisda, it's inherently only an issa derabanan. According to Rabbah, it would be an issa daraisa, but it's not an issa daraisa because we employ the svara of hayalu meklai le'archim. Since it's possible that guests will show up while it's still Yom Tov, so there is a little bit of a tzarech Yom Tov in your cooking that you're doing now, so it's only an issa derabanan. And now the erev tavshilin is matter the issa derabanan. That makes sense in the context of cooking and baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. But how does that make sense in the context of setting up an eruvei chatzeiros? What does that have to do with setting up an eruvei chatzeiros? The fact that you made something cooked on Erev Yom Tov, so you say, I began my cooking on Erev Yom Tov. What does that have to do with an eruvei chatzeiros? So to make it a eruvei chatzeiros has nothing to do with an erev tavshilin. There's no way that an erev tavshilin is going to render that permissible. Continues the Mechaber in Siv Beis, right after the words of the Ramah. Let's say Yom Tov is Thursday and Friday, and you remember on Thursday that you neglected to make an eruvei chatzeiros or an eruvei techumin for Shabbos. Then the Mechaber says, Yachal la'arev eruvei chatzeiros b'tnai. An eruvei chatzeiros you can make on Thursday with a tnai. Let's see how this works. Says the Mishnah Berurah Nois Cotton Daled. First he says, the Mechaber said that this works on the Yom Tov Rishon of the Shtei Yomim Tovim Shel Golius. Says the Chavetz Chaim, La'afuke Shtei Yomim Shel Rosh Hashanah, the Kiyom Echad Arichta Damya. Like we always say, you can't employ a Tanai on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, because the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not Sveika de Yoma. It's a Yuma Arichta. So a Tanai never works on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. But if it's Shtei Yomim Tovim Shel Golius, if you have Yom Tov on Thursday and Friday, Shtei Yomim Tovim Shel Golius, and on Thursday you remember that you didn't make it a eruvei chatzeiros, you could make it a eruvei chatzeiros b'tanai. Oif cotton hay b'tanai. The Chavetz Chaim explains what the tanai is. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Tahainu sheyoymar. What you're going to do on Thursday is you're going to say, Im hayoym chayil. If today Yom Tov Rishon is really not Yom Tov, if it's chayil, so then no problem. Ani manichai b'shvil eruvei chatzeiros l'Shabbos. So okay, I'm setting up an eruvei chatzeiros now on Thursday, which is a weekday, for the coming Shabbos. No problem at all. V'im hayoym kodesh. But if on the other hand today Thursday is really Yom Tov, eini yomer klum, then there should be no significance in what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything. Forget about it. Ulamachar, and then tomorrow on Friday, which is Yom Tov Rishon, Yomar, take the eruvei chatzeiros and say, Im hayoym kodesh, if today, Friday, is the real day of Yom Tov, Hare Erafti Esmail. So then I made an Erev yesterday, and this is an Erev. I made it already yesterday. V'im hayoym chayil, and if today is really the weekday, Ani meneichel l'shem eruvei chatzeiros. So then I'm preparing the eruvei chatzeiros today. Vayim b'simin shin tzad gimel b'Mishnah Berurah Sivkot and Vav, where he says that when you set up an eruvei chatzeiros like this, you should not make a bracha. Now the Mechaber continues, and the Mechaber says in the last line of Siman Tov Kuf Chav Ches, Aval eruvei techumin ein manichan oisai b'Yom Tov b'Tanai. You could make this Tanai in order to establish an eruvei chatzeiros, but you cannot use this Tanai to make it eruvei techumin, because by the eruvei techumin there's an additional problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah Nois Cotton Vav, Aval eruvei techumin ein manichan. Why? Because what are the mechanics of an eruvei techumin? The mechanics of eruvei techumin are, I live in this city. I have a tchum of 2,000 amas from the city limits and outwards. I want to adjust my tchum. I want to move my tchum by employing an eruvei techumin. So on Erev Shabbos, I'm going to take pas, I'm going to take a suda, and I'm going to put it 1,000 amas outside of the city limits. By doing that, I'm kaina shvisa. I acquire habitation 1,000 amas outside the city limits, and now my tchum starts from there. So now I have a new tchum. Now I have 2,000 amas from there and outwards. That's the mechanics of eruvei techumin. Explains the Chofetz Chaim, you cannot do that on Yom Tov. The kinyan shvisa hu kinyan bias, because that's akin to buying a house. You're being kaina shvisa. That means I'm acquiring a habitation outside the city. You can't be kaina a house on Yom Tov even using a tanai. The kasav el yarabba tahainu dafka lechatchila. This prohibition is only lechatchila. Aval b'di'evet kishekvar erev. If you did make an eruvei chatzeiros or eruvei techumin on Yom Tov, mahani mishnei Yom Tovim shel Golius, it will take effect if you do it on the Shnei Yom Tovim shel Golius. Ve'aviyah pri begadim gam ke le'el b'siman taf tezayin v'ayin sham b'biralacha dibra amaschel mipnei. Okay, now we go to the final siman in siman taf kuf chaf tes. Dinei simchas Yom Tov, the halachas that governs simchas Yom Tov, the mitzvah to be misameach on Yom Tov. If memory serves, I think there's a gra. I think it's a gra that says that the mitzvah of simchas Yom Tov is one of the most difficult mitzvahs of the Torah. Why? Because you have a tzivui, you have a mitzvah that for the duration of Yom Tov you must be besimcha. That means you're not allowed to get aggravated on Yom Tov. So you can't be upset on Yom Tov. No matter what happens. Your kid breaks the piece of china, you can't be upset. Kid tears his suit, you can't be upset. The kids get into a fight, you can't be upset. Something goes wrong in the house, your Yom Tov Suda gets burnt, you can't be upset. Whatever it is, you can't be upset. You got to be b'simcha on Yom Tov. What a beautiful mitzvah also. We say in davening, I don't know how much people appreciate it. We say, "Vatitan lanu Hashem Elokeinu ba'ava." The Rebbeinu Shalom, out of love, gave us mayadim l'simcha. He gave us appointed times where you have to be misameach. Imagine, try to explain that to a non-Jew on the street. Go over to him and tell him, tomorrow, you got to be misimcha. Forget everything. Tomorrow, no aggravation, no stress. Tomorrow, you got to be misimcha. Sounds like a wonderful mitzvah. So that's why we say, "Vatitan lanu Hashem Elokeinu ba'ava." The Rebbeinu Shalom did this to us out of love. He gave us mayadim l'simcha. Times that's it. You got to be misameach. So this is the mitzvah of simchas Yom Tov. Dinei simchas Yom Tov u'boy daled seifim. And here in this siman we have 4 seifim. Says the Mechaber, Sif Aleph, mitzvahs Yom Tov. The mitzvah of Yom Tov is lechalkoi, to divide up Yom Tov. Chetzyai lebeis hamedrash, half of your time on Yom Tov is supposed to be spent in the Beis Medrash. V'chetzyai le'achila u'shtia, and half of it is supposed to be engaged in being misabeach on a more gashmiistic level in achila and shtia, eating and drinking, doing things that the guf is nena from. So half the day is for the nefesh, half the day is in the Beis Medrash, half the day is for the guf, half the day is achila u'shtia. Of course, this doesn't mean reveling like a drunkard. It doesn't mean wallowing in gashmias. It means l'chvoid Yom Tov. It's a mitzvah. You're elevating the gashmias into ruchnias. But it's a gashmias type of hana that you're supposed to be engaged in. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Aleph. Mitzvahs Yom Tov l'chalkai. The mitzvah of Yom Tov is to divide up your time. Chatzi l'Hashem v'chatzi lochem. Where do we know this from? Says the Chofetz Chaim. The Bechad Kra, in one pasuk, ksiv, it says, Atzeres tihiyeh lochem. It should be an Atzeres, it should be a Yom Tov lochem, for you. Bechad Kra, and in another pasuk, ksiv, it says, Atzeres l'Hashem Elokecha, that it's an Atzeres, a Yom Tov for Hashem. Valkein Amru Chazal, and based on this, the Chazal said, that we have to divide up Yom Tov, Chetzyai l'Hashem, half of it is more for Hashem, Tahainu l'Torah u'tfila, meaning limud HaTorah and tfila, that's what's l'Hashem, V'chetzyai lachem, and half of it is for you, what the guf is nena from, Tahainu l'achila u'shtia, which is eating and drinking, bishvil einig Yom Tov, for the mitzvah of einig Yom Tov. So we learn this out from a pasuk, Chatzi l'Hashem v'chatzi lochem. Valkain, and therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, Yesh ligar b'chazonim hama'arichim yoyser mechetzyo shel yom. We have to complain about the chazonim, the Bali Tefillah, that get up and they carry on in the davening, and they stretch out the davening to go past chatzeiros, because now you're going over the limit. It's supposed to be chatzi l'Hashem and chatzi lachem. You're taking away from the chatzi lachem. The Kosra Paiskim, and the Paiskim write, the kachu aderech hanochain, that this is the proper way things should be done. Ba'boker, in the morning, makdimu leilech labatei haknesiyos, you get up and you go to shul, ulabati midrashos, and to the bati midrashos. Now the Mefarshim say that makdimin over here doesn't mean like it means in other places, that you should get up early, like you should get up by nets. That's not what makdimin means here. Makdimin means, because we know the Gemara says that on Yom Tov ma'acharin, you go to the Beis HaKnesses later than usual. So Makdimin doesn't mean get up especially early. What Makdimin means is it's the first thing you do. You don't get up and go eat a Yom Tov breakfast and then go to shul. Don't think that Yom Tov did. It's Einig Yom Tov, I'm supposed to have achilu shtia, so maybe I should get up and eat a beautiful breakfast and then go out to daven. No. The kachu aderech ba'boker makdimin leilech labatei knesiyos labatei midrashos. The first thing we do is we go to shul. Umispalelin, and we daven. V'karven b'Torah b'inyanei shel yom, and we have the kriyas HaTorah that on Yom Tov generally speaks about inyanei de yoma. On Pesach we learn about Yitzias Mitzrayim. On Shavuos we learn about Kabbalas HaTorah. Umispalelin musaf, and we daven musaf. And then after that, v'chayzrin l'baten v'oichlin. Then we can go back to our house and we can eat a Yom Tov Suda, because we have to eat before chatzeiros. So even though we didn't finish the chatzi l'Hashem, we didn't do half of the day for Hashem yet, we can't, because we got to go home and have the Suda before chatzeiros. You have to eat before chatzeiros. You're not allowed to fast. So you get up, you go to shul, you daven chakras, kriyas HaTorah, musaf, then go home and eat a Suda. Then, v'holchid l'batei midrashos, now go back to shul, v'shoinin ad chatzi hayom, and learn until chatzeiros. So you're going to learn until 12 o'clock, or 1 o'clock, depending on the season, depending on daylight savings time. V'achar kach, and then after that, now even though it's chatzeiros, you weren't mekayim chatzi l'Hashem, because you took out a small section of time for your Yom Tov Suda for chatzeiros. So v'achar kach, after chatzeiros, Kisheboz mana mincha mispalin tfilas hamincha. You'll wait until mincha gedola. Mincha gedola is approximately 12:30, 12:35 / 1:30, 1:35. So now what you did so far today was you got up, you went to shul, you spent most of the morning davening. Then you went home and you had a Yom Tov Suda. Then you came back to shul and you spent the time until mincha gedola. So you took some time from the afternoon now, because Mincha Gedola is a half an hour after chatzeiros. So now you took some time from the afternoon to make up for the time that you took for the morning for your Suda. You spent that time davening Mincha and learning. And then, Lihisaneg b'simchas Yom Tov shar hayoyim ad halayla k'dei l'kayim chetzyo lachem. Now you could go spend the rest of the time until night, going home and spending time with your family, eating and drinking, and doing it all l'shem shamayim l'simchas Yom Tov. That's the scenario that the Chavetz Chaim is describing. Now, I don't know if the math works out for us exactly that way, because I think most people take more time than that for their Suda. Maybe depending on what time you started davening, you come home later, but you get the gist. The gist of it here is you start the day with davening. And you make sure that between the davening and the learning that you do, so between the davening and the Daf Yomi shiur and the Dirshu shiur and the Rav's drasha, you make sure that you have half of the day is spent on tefillah and Torah, and the other half of the day could be spent on more physical pursuits, of course, l'chvayid Yom Tov, l'shem mitzvah, achila, shtia, spending time with your family, uchadayim. V'ayin l'kamei b'siv gimel. Okay, let's do a little bit more. Go to the bottom line here. In the Shulchan Aruch, let's go a little bit further here in Sif Aleph. Says the Mechaber, Va'al yitzamtzem ba'yitzais Yom Tov. A person should not be karg. Don't be cheap. Don't be tight-fisted when it comes to expenditures that you're making for Einig Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting bays, the bottom line, kuftan bays amid bays. Val yitzamthem, shekol mizaynoisav yitziyaisa shel adam tzuvin loime Rosh Hashanah. All of the money that you're going to get, doesn't say here money, by the way, it says mizaynos, which means food. And it's very interesting. When we talk about kol mizaynoisav yitziyaisa shel adam tzuvin loime Rosh Hashanah, people usually understand that to mean that on Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbanan Shalom is geyser how much money I'm going to make. Am I going to make more money? Am I going to make less money? It's mizaynoisav shel adam. Sometimes you could make less money, but you can get a lot of free food. Suddenly COVID-19 and there's all sorts of programs going on, and suddenly the government is giving out food like it's going out of style. So you got food. Maybe you got less money. Maybe your job was impaired, but you got food. So mizaynoisav encompasses everything. So shakol mizaynoisav yitziyaisa shel adam ksuvin loime Rosh Hashanah. So on Rosh Hashanah, the Rabbanan Shalom was geyser what you're going to get. So if you go on a spending spree, you might run out of money early because you're not getting any additional money. But chutz be'aitzai shabbosais v'yamim tovim, with the exception of the money that you spend for Shabbos and Yom Tov. She'em piches peiches in loy. If you're cheap, the Rabbanan Shalom will take away some of your money. V'imoisif, and if you go ahead and you spend, moisif and loy, the Rabbanan Shalom will give you extra money. You spend money for Shabbos, the Rabbanan Shalom will add on to the money that you're going to get. Now, it doesn't mean that you should go completely crazy on Yom Tov and walk into the pomegranate and say, give me the most expensive cut of meat that you have. It's for Shabbos. It's only something that's in line with what you would normally do. In other words, if you go into Glattmart and you see a beautiful roast, and that's taka, something that's within your station, it's a roast that you could see buying, maybe it's a little bit out of your range, but you say, you know what, for Shabbos, hey, listen, it's Shabbos, Moisif in line, no problem. I'll go and I'll spend it for Shabbos. But it doesn't mean that you go completely crazy. Okay, all right, I think we're going to stop over here. So Mirz Hashem, next time, which will I guess be Sunday, we're going to pick up on the top line, the Shulchan Aruch, Gimel Amud Aleph, right by the Ois Cut and Gimel for the Mishnah Berurah. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. So it turns out that on Sunday we're going to learn Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, and on Monday, Mirz Hashem, we're going to learn Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, and we're going to be Messiah Chelik Hey in Mishnah Berurah. Wow, what a beautiful accomplishment. I would like to arrange that on Sunday we do a Zoom shiur, so we could actually see each other and interact with each other. And maybe once we begin Chelik Vav, maybe we'll start doing at least a couple of times a week a Zoom shiur at a fixed time. So I'm announcing this now during the shiur. If everybody could think about it a little bit, and I'll be in touch with you, let's set up a time for Monday. Let's set up a time slot that works for the Olam, where we could do a Zoom shiur together and we could actually enjoy each other's company. Everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rabbanan Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa to all those in need. The Rabbanan Shalom should take away all the tzaros that are afflicting Klal Yisrael. And we should all be zoichet to be makabel pnei Shechina. We should come to the Geula Shlema b'meher v'yameinu, and it should be b'simcha. Be well.